Well, Jesus was a remarkable teacher. On numerous occasions, we read in the 4 biographies that are written on his life that those who sat under his teaching simply responded afterwards by saying, "He teaches with an authority like no other." Jesus is a remarkable teacher. One of the key features of his teaching was his use of story known as parables. Jesus would use the events and experiences of everyday life to help people understand God and his way of life. In Luke 15, we find 3 parables. They're among, I believe, his most famous and I would tell you his most significant with regard to the message being communicated. He launches into these 3 parables, as he does every parable, out of a given context. In other words, something is taking place. Something is taking place with a group of people, small or large, that all of a sudden causes him to launch into a parable in order to help people respond to that which they're experiencing. Well, that happens here in Luke chapter 15. And for the sake of time, I want to dive right in. Here's the context of these 3 parables. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him. But the Pharisees and teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. That's the context. The Jewish religious leaders spot Jesus hanging around with a group of non-religious, not spiritual at all, morally loose people. Sinners is the label that's used here. These were Jews who were not holding on to the tradition that they had been raised in. They had decided that they had no respect for, no regard for the commands of God. That they were going to live life along their terms, which, as he would say later in the chapter, led to some wild living. Well, Jesus is hanging out with these sinners. And among these sinners, perhaps the worst of the bunch, were tax collectors. Tax collectors were Jewish men whose integrity and ethical standards were so low and their desire for money so great that they were willing to turn on their own people and collect taxes for them on behalf of the Romans who were oppressing the Jews. Well, Jesus is not only hanging out with these people, he's sharing a meal with them. Sharing a meal with someone like this in ancient times signaled acceptance of them. Well, the Jewish religious leaders see this, and they say to one another, they're muttering, "Cannot believe that Jesus, who claims to be God, claims to be from God, that he's hanging out with lowlifes such as this." Well, in response to their muttering, Jesus now launches into what becomes 3 parables to help them understand, to help his audience that day understand some truth about God and his heart and mind for people of all kinds. And so he launches in. Well, last week we began this. We skipped over the first 2 parables. I'm going to do that again today, but I'm going to teach on those next week. So I trust that you'll be here at Winter Garden or LFA as we look at those first 2 parables. But today I want to finish with the 3rd parable, which we covered in essence the first half of last week. So in quick review, and by the way, if you weren't here or weren't able to hear that teaching, I want to strongly encourage you to go to our website or our app and listen to it, okay? But let me just give a very brief review of that so you know where we're coming from. It'll be good for all of us, even if you heard that teaching, okay? In verse 11, we read this. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The youngest one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' And so he divided his property between them." The younger son wants his share of the estate now. This is a shocking request. No one ever made this request at this time. An estate was not divided until a father died. And so what this son, by making this request, is really saying is this: "Dad, I wish you were dead. Dad, I wish you were dead." Can you imagine hearing that? That's what he was saying to his father. Well, as shocking as that request was, what's perhaps even more shocking is the fact that his father grants it. The father takes his estate and he divides it between his 2 sons. Well, the son takes the money that he ended up gaining from the sale, apparently, of some of the property that he was given by his dad. He heads out quickly to a distant land, and he then ends up squandering everything in wild living. At that point, Jesus said his only choice is to return home. His hope, his plan is that he can get a job as a hired man with his father in hopes of making the money necessary to pull his life back together again. Well, as he's heading home, his dad sees him at a distance, and what ends up happening, the son did not expect, and that was this. We read about it in verse 20. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Jesus goes on to say that the father brings the son home and ends up throwing a party for him. He throws his own robe on him. He puts a ring on his finger. He has his servants put sandals on his feet. And he kills a fattened calf, which was highly unusual, was only done in the most important of occasions. He kills the fattened calf in celebration. He invites the community, and now there's a big party going on because his son who was lost has returned home, reconciled to his father. Well, as far as this younger son is concerned, this is a happy ending. Well, as we learned in the very beginning, the parable doesn't end there. If you will, that was Act 1. We now head to Act 2 because there's another son. What's going on with the other son? Well, let's pick up the story, verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. This is what the older son, he's out in the field as he, and we assume at the end of the day, is heading back toward the house. All of a sudden, he hears music. He sees at the distance there's dancing going on. He doesn't understand what's happening. And so he takes one of the servants and says, hey, what's going on? The servant explains, well, your brother has returned. Your father is overcome with joy such that he is throwing a party to celebrate your brother's return. Well, how does the older son receive this news? The next line tells us, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. He is not a happy camper. Obviously, this doesn't say much for his feelings and thoughts toward his younger brother, does it? Well, what's the reason for his anger? Why is he refusing to come in to join the party? Well, let's read on because he tells us. Verse 28. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. And so his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. The elder son says, all these years I've been slaving for you. Let me just pause right there and ask this question. How does this oldest son see himself in relationship to his father? He tells us, doesn't he? He sees himself as a slave. I've been slaving for you. In fact, take a look at how he responds. The first word out of his mouth upon his dad greeting him, he says, look, look. Can I give you a modern day translation of that? Hey, look, pal. You ever wanted to say that to somebody? Hey, look, pal. All these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. And what has it gotten me? Not so much as a little party with a few friends. And yet, a little brother comes home. He hasn't slaved for you. He hasn't obeyed your orders. In fact, he's broken them. He's just done the opposite. He took your part of the estate, went out gallivanting about, losing all of it, and now he comes crawling back. And what do? You throw him a party to end all parties. The older son is angry. he's not coming in to join the party. Let me pause and ask you, does it sound like he has a point? Do you listen to this and say, yeah, he's being treated unfairly? He certainly thinks so. Well, is he? No, he's not. Let me explain why. Let's go back to the opening of the parable. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger son said to the father, Father, give me my share of the estate. And so he divided his property between them. The younger son got his share of the estate. Who else got his share of the estate? The older son. He got his share of the estate too. He wasn't shortchanged. In fact, what Jesus doesn't tell us here, he doesn't get this specific in telling the story. It isn't necessary, but let me just give you a little context, a little background here. If this father in the story had divided his property as was customarily done, the older son would have received 2/3 of the estate. The younger son, 1/3. You see, at this point in time, it was customary when a father died that the estate be divided such that the oldest child received double what the rest of the children received. And so in this case, with 2 sons, if this father had divided the estate as was customarily done, he would have received 2/3 of the estate, his younger brother 1/3. Now, Jesus doesn't tell us that because it isn't necessary to tell us that. But let me tell you who knew that. His audience. His audience knew how it normally was divided. So this son has received at least half and very possibly 2/3 of his dad's estate. The point being, the older son wasn't left out. Now look at how the father responds. Verse 31. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. He greets his son. It's just that, his son, and he loves his son. Oh, does he love his son? How do we know? We know because of what he did. What did he do? Well, he gave him part of his estate. Now it's more than that. You see, he did what no father, no patriarch at this time would ever do in such a situation, and that is he left the party and he ran out to his son. As a matter of protocol and as a matter of pride, no father would lower himself, humble himself to go out to greet his son. And any patriarch or father like this at this point in time wouldn't have pleaded with his son to come in. He would have commanded him to. He would have ordered him to out of respect for him. This father doesn't order him, doesn't command him. This father simply pleads with him, meaning he leaves the choice with him. He leaves the choice with him. You know, by refusing to go in, this son was actually bringing shame upon his father. Those in the community who were at the party would have certainly asked, where's your other son? And the father needing to answer that question, he's not coming. Oh, why wouldn't he be coming? That would have brought shame upon this father. You know, I mentioned last week that the younger son brought shame upon his father by leaving and making the request, leaving as he did. Friends, the older son has shamed his father as well, just in a different way. Well, nonetheless, this father humbles himself. He runs out, he pleads with his son, and he says to him, my son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But this son is blind to that. What's blinding him? His pride, his self-righteousness, his goodness. Look what I've done, he says. Look at my obedience. I've earned more. I deserved better. Do you want to know what's really bothering this young man? What's really bothering him is the fact that his father has dispensed grace upon his younger brother, and his younger brother, in his mind, does not deserve it. And you know what's true? He doesn't. That's why it's grace. Do you know what grace is? Grace is undeserved favor. This father has dispensed grace upon his younger son. The problem is that the older brother doesn't understand grace. He doesn't see himself needing grace. After all, he's earned what he's received. He deserves what he has gotten. His goodness has made him worthy of his father's favor. Yet his bad little brother is being blessed by his dad. You know, so much so, you know what, like put him over the top was the fact that now that his son was, that younger brother was back, and the dad was welcoming him back, what that meant was he was once again a part of the estate. And this older brother, this is just what tips him over. Well, let me bring this home with some summarizing thoughts. I said last week, and I want to say it again this week because it's so important, God's love for us is unconditional. Friends, our behavior, your behavior, my behavior, please understand this, does not serve in any way to increase or decrease God's love for us. How you live this week, how you'll live the coming week, does not impact in a way of increasing or decreasing God's fundamental love for you as his creation. Now, let me be very quick to say that our behavior does serve to increase or decrease our fellowship with him. But that's true in every relationship we have in life. Let me ask you, how is your fellowship with someone who keeps offending you? Is that sweet fellowship? Or is that sour fellowship? Or if you keep offending someone, how are they going to respond to you? Sweetness? Well, friends, it's the same thing is true with God. When you and I live in a way that offends the holiness of God, our fellowship with him is soured. It's not sweet. But understand something, in spite of that, he still loves you. It's in effect, every parent understands this, because our kids all do things that sour our fellowship. But we don't stop loving them because they're our child. Well, if I put it to you this way, behavior is not the means by which to gain God's love, but rather our response to having received it. Can you sit with that for just a moment? Our behavior is not the means by which to gain God's love, but rather our response to having received it. All right, well, the parable has two sons. In the younger son, Jesus gives us a picture of a sinner. In fact, it's a picture that we all recognize. He shames his father. He's selfish. He's self-indulgent. He lives an immoral life. He's estranged from his father. He's off gallivanting about. It's very clear. He's a sinner. Everybody understands this young man is a sinner. He's separated from God, separated from his father, separated from God, sinners. In the older brother, Jesus gives us a picture of the opposite. Obedient to the father, to the letter of the law, self-disciplined, self-controlled, morally good. As we define sin so often, and as we label sinners, he's not, because he's really, really good. But I want you to notice something that's true of both brothers, and this is extremely important. Both of them are estranged from their father. How do we know? Because in both cases, he has to go out to them. Both are estranged from their father. So much so in the case of the older brother that he refuses, in spite of the father coming out and pleading with him, to go on in. Neither son lives in right relationship with his father. One because of his badness, and the other because of his goodness. They're both separated from their father. Neither one of them rejoices over his father. Pastor Tim Keller puts it this way. What did the younger son most want in life? He chafed at having to partake of his family's assets under the father's supervision. He wanted to make his own decisions and have unfettered control of his portion of the wealth. How did he get that? He did it with a bold power play, a flagrant defiance of community standards, a declaration of complete independence. What did the older son most want? If we think about it, we realize that he wanted the same thing as his brother. He was just as resentful of the father as the younger son. He too wanted his father's goods rather than the father himself. However, while the younger son or younger brother went far away, the elder brother stayed close and never disobeyed. That was his way to get control. His unspoken demand was this: I have never disobeyed you. Now you have to do things in life the way I want them to be done. You see, neither son loved their father. Neither son loved their father. They were both using their father to satisfy their own desires. And so the older son becomes angry because he believed he had the right to tell his dad, I'll tell you what to do with your robe. I'll tell you what to do with that ring. I'll tell you what to do with that sandals. And how dare you kill the fattened calf? Who do you think you are? Look, pal. When his dad came out to him, had he loved his dad, what would he have said? Oh, Dad, I don't know what's going on, but I just am thrilled to see you so happy. Dad, it does my heart good to just see you rejoicing. Can't wait to join in. But that's not what he did. Why? Because he wasn't concerned about his father's happiness. He was concerned about his own happiness. And his father had ruined his happiness because his father didn't give him what he believed he deserved. Well, what's the point in this? Well, to us, it's a tough truth. And the truth is this, that our love for God can be just the opposite of his love for us. You see, his love for us is unconditional, but our love for him can be conditional. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is this: God, if you do what I want you to do, if you handle my life the way I want it to be handled, I will love you. In fact, you know what I'm going to do, God? I'm going to live in such a way as to deserve your blessing. I'm going to obey, I'm going to serve, I'm going to give, I'm going to attend church. Heck, I'm even going to fast. And as a result, I'm going to deserve your hand of blessing in my life. You see, if we think like this, then we have a conditioned relationship with God. And then here's what happens when life doesn't go our way, when it becomes unfair in our minds, we become resentful. And if, on the other hand, we come across people that we look at and we say, that's a bad person, and yet look at the blessing being poured out in their life, it then, in many cases, puts us over the edge. Resentful at them for what they've received, and resentful ultimately at God for allowing things to play out the way they have. So, two sons, two audiences. The tax collectors and sinners are listening to this story, and do you think they struggled to know which son they were? No, they very clearly saw. So that leaves another audience with one other son. And the religious leaders were bright enough to know who Jesus was telling them they were. I want you to notice how the parable ends. You know, we watch TV shows, you know, when you come to the end of a season, and like somebody gets shot, or somebody ends up in a burning building or something, and they end the show, and you go, no, I have to wait till next season. Yes, that's exactly what they want to do to you. They want to get you back for the new season. Jesus does the same here, because you come to the end of the story. In the last verse, he says to his son, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again and was lost and is found, meaning your younger brother, he's back home, he's reconciled. But where's the older brother as the story ends? He's where? He's still out in the field. Does he come in? Jesus doesn't tell us. Oh, Jesus, go, yeah, Jesus, you got to go on with the story. Does he come in? And he doesn't tell us. So when you and I get to heaven, Jesus, you know that story about that brothers thing? Does he ever come in? I'm in suspense for 70 years. Oh, kidding aside, here's what Jesus was saying. The tax collectors and the sinners, they come home to the Father. And you religious leaders, you don't. And this would have rocked their world. We don't come home to the Father? I mean, you want to talk about a gut punch? You see, friends, you and I can be estranged from God either by our badness or our goodness. You see, sin is so much deeper than breaking God's rules. We so easily define sin as this kind of behavior versus this kind of behavior. And friends, while there's truth in the fact that behavior is sinful, can be sinful, what's the real issue? The issue is what is bound up in the heart. Sin falls forth from the heart. And it comes from a heart that is filled with self. And the desire for self-satisfaction. And the depth of sin in the case of the religious leaders was they wanted to use God for their benefit. And they were going to use their goodness, believing that their goodness enabled them to deserve it. Well, on the bottom line, friends, what Jesus is saying to both audiences is this. At the deepest of levels, your real issue in life is that you're separated from your Father in heaven. If you want to begin to pull your life together, it begins by being reconciled to your Heavenly Father. To take yourself out of your own heart, to recognize that self-absorption and self-indulgence and self-glorification and self-desire and self-indulgence is what sin is really at its core. To confess that, repent of it, and to say, oh, Father, I need you to fill my heart. What makes this possible? Well, as the story says, the Father ran out to them. The imagery here is powerful, friends. It's so powerful. It struck me this week. I sat back in my chair and just said, oh my goodness. What do I mean? Do you understand that God, in the person of Jesus, left the estate called heaven where there's a party going on? And he ran out. He ran out to get tax collectors and sinners, and he ran out to get goody two-shoes. He ran out to get people by the world's definition who are bad, and he came out to get people who are good by the world's definition. He came out to get all of us. And just like in the story when I said last week, whose robe did the father give the younger son? It was his robe. Jesus came, he ran out to us. We didn't come to him, he ran out to us. And guess whose robe he gave us, offers us? His own. And as the scripture says, it's a robe of righteousness, unblemished, perfect in every way, holy, as we sang earlier. What does he get in exchange? What did I say last week when this son came home and this father goes out to him? I said to you, what do you think this son looked like? He had been feeding pigs, working in a pig pen. What do you think he looked like? What do you think he smelled like? And yet this father comes up and he embraces him and passionately kisses him. He doesn't care what he looks like or smells like. It's his son. Jesus, friends, left the estate, the party that was going on, came to earth, humbled himself to the point of becoming a baby. He allowed his mere creation to put him on a cross so that he could make his robe of righteousness available to us. What does he get in exchange? He gets our filthy, smelly rags of a sinful heart. And he does that because of his great love for us. Is it deserved? No. It's grace. And when you understand that, it's stunning. And it has to capture you in such a way as to say, oh my goodness, I have 3 kids. I would give my life for any one of my 3 kids. But let me tell you something. I'm not giving any one of their lives for any of you on your best or worst days. God gave his son for you on your worst day, as well as in days of pride and self-righteousness where you think you deserve something because of your goodness. Friends, this is the love of God, and it's stunning. And when you understand that and you come home to the Father and you're reconciled to him, then your response as you go out in life is to say, and I want to live in sweet fellowship with him because I want to live for his pleasure, not mine. Knowing that when you live for his pleasure, the ultimate benefactor of that is you and I, because now our hearts are filled with him. How do you know that this has happened to you? Well, joy. You receive reconciliation with him with joy, and then you become a dispenser of grace to others. You become a dispenser of grace from others because you realize that you've been a recipient of grace. And grace begets grace.